spice things up a little bit. All right, so I'll be teaching a course called Military Law and the Law of War. It really is kind of a grab bag of a few different issues that I'm going to tell you about right now in terms of what we'll be discussing, learning about in the course. Tell you a little bit about me, just so you know why I'm teaching this course. I'm currently an associate professor here at UCF. I've been here for 2 years now. But before teaching here, I was a professor at the United States Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. So I've got some experience teaching military law and the law of war classes to people who actually engage in war. And so hopefully I can share some of those things. You can see on the far right there, that's a picture of what I look like with less hair. I also, in addition to having prior served there, I served on active duty for 14 years in the Air Force JAG Corps. I'm now a reservist in the Air Force JAG Corps, meaning I spend about a month a year practicing law for the United States Air Force. My current assignment is a really fascinating one, which will have some application to what we're going to talk about in the class, because I am a legal advisor to the International Military Committee of NATO. That's them there.
So every summer you get to go to Brussels?
Yes, it's awful.
It's rough.
So this is the International Military Committee at NATO. It's 3- and 4-star generals from every NATO country, and they're the ones who decide militarily what NATO does. Okay? And as you might imagine, there are some legal issues. One of the fascinating things that is true about NATO is that it is a consensus-based organization, meaning that NATO cannot take an action unless all the members, currently 28, provisionally 29 members, fail to object. That doesn't mean they'll have to agree affirmatively, but if one objects, we don't do it, right? So imagine what it's like to practice law in that environment. We have to convince 28 nations, and when I'm trying to convince this 3-star general and that 3-star general and that 3-star general and their staffs, it's not just them there in Brussels, lovely Brussels in the summertime, they go back to their Pentagons and their State Departments and get political input about what the legal interpretation of something is, and it comes back. So it's fascinating, lots of discussion of law of war. This is not me, but I'll show you where I sit. That guy's head right there. So when I'm there sitting at this meeting, I'm the head behind the American 3-star Air Force general there. Anyway, hope to bring some of that interesting real-world live experience, current experience, in addition to some of my former experiences. So here's what we're going to be talking about over the course of the course. The constitutional rights of service members, and I'll give you a couple of examples of each of these things here in a moment. As you may know, the constitutional rights of service members are not the same as the constitutional rights of civilians in the United States, and we'll be talking about how some of those things differ. Talk about military justice processes and offenses, and the law of armed conflict or the law of war. So each of those will take roughly a month over the course of the semester. So let me give you an example of what we're talking about. Constitutional rights of service members. Article 88 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which is the federal code that says what is illegal for service members to do, prescribes, actually identifies the crimes. Article 88 is one of those crimes. And it says, sorry for the eye chart here, any commissioned officer who uses contemptuous words against the President, Vice President, Congress, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of the Military Department, Secretary of Transportation, or the Governor or Legislature of any state, territory, or commonwealth, or possession in which he is on duty or present shall be punished as a court-martial may direct. What constitutional right does that implicate?
First Amendment.
Yeah, the First Amendment, right? So as a military officer, while I'm on active duty, there are things I cannot say that everyone else in this room can. Things that I can be criminally prosecuted for saying that everyone else in the room can say. That's just one example. Another example of how military service members' rights are somewhat different is political involvement. Your lawn this fall may have looked like this, or it may have looked like this. It's illegal for a military member's lawn to look like that. Political involvement is restricted when you're a service member. And there are good reasons for that, things that we'll talk about in the course. Why is it that a service member is not allowed to say the president's an idiot? Why is it that a service member is not allowed to put 20 campaign signs on their yard or one campaign sign on their yard? There are reasons for that that turn back to why the military is separate and why there's civilian control of the military in the first place. All right, that's an example of constitutional rights. We'll also be talking, in addition to First Amendment rights, about some equal protection issues as well. Things like don't ask, don't tell, and other cases. One of the most important cases in the history of equal rights for women was actually a military case. The Frontiero versus Richardson case about a service member's rights to benefits based on the fact that she was a woman versus what was presumed at the time was that more benefits went to men, believe it or not. An example of military justice process and offenses we might talk about. We'll be talking about who makes the decision to prosecute in a military case. Here's a hint. It's not a lawyer. The commander, the person in charge of the member, gets to decide whether they're going to be court-martialed or not a lawyer with legal training. Somebody with zero legal training makes the decision about whether somebody's going to be prosecuted. And guess who gets to decide who's going to be the jury in that case? That same commander. The prosecutor decides who is on the jury in a court-martial. The prosecutor, in the sense that they are the commander, the person who makes the decision, and the lawyers actually represent the commander's interest in the trial. We'll talk about how that works. Article 86 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice is one of these many kind of military unique offenses that we as civilians don't have to think about. Article 86 is the one that says you can't be absent from work. And in fact, it says, this is a little time clock. Has anybody ever actually seen one of these? I thought about this. Yeah. Okay. I don't know if anybody else still uses these. That's a time clock. I used to punch one long ago. Being late to work at Walmart. Maybe get a slap on the wrist, maybe get your pay docked a little bit, you do it a lot, maybe you get fired. Being late to work in the military is a crime. Criminally punishable by jail time and fines and loss of rank, etc. That's a big difference. And we'll talk about why. Why is it the case that it's a criminal act to be 2 minutes late to work? Because it is in the military. One more interesting specific military offense. Article 90, again, I'll read this since it's kind of small. Article 90 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice says, any person subject to this chapter, any service member, who strikes his superior commissioned officer or draws or lifts up any weapon or offers any violence against him while he is in the execution of his office or willfully disobeys a lawful command of his superior commissioned officer. All right, so that's the violation, which as a commissioned officer I love, right? This is great. This protects me. Don't be raising your weapon at me. Shall be punished if the offense is committed in the time of war by, who's got a guess as to what the next word in that sentence is? Here's a hint. It relates to Professor Cashman's course. Wow. Right? So if in a time of war one of my subordinates comes up and strikes me in the face, the maximum authorized penalty in that case is the death penalty for that. Why? Why in the world do we kill people for something like that? Notice what else. It doesn't have to be he strikes me in the face. Willfully disobeys a lawful command. I give you a lawful command, you willfully disobey it. The maximum authorized penalty in that case is death. Well, that's a little bit different. We'll talk about why. The last block of the course will be something kind of a departure, not so much about the rights of the service members or the responsibilities to obey the Uniform Code of Military Justice, but here we'll be talking, and I hope I've turned the audio up already, we'll be talking about the law of war. I think in the future this is actually a course that I'm going to be developing for an entire semester. Right now we're just kind of trying it out, but this is what governs war. A lot of people think, well, nothing, there's no law governing war. I mean, it's blowing people up and killing people and breaking things and so forth. How can law apply? Well, there are laws that apply to war. I'm sure you've heard of the Geneva Conventions. There are others, and we're going to be exploring some of the kind of basic understandings of the law of war, and doing some watching of videos like this one. Let's see if I got the sound. All right, let me make sure I get the volume as loud as I can so we can appreciate what's going on. Sounds like a video game. That's Donkey Kong. All right, let's start again.
Descending crew.
Let me set this up 1 second. This is footage from an HC-130 gunship called a Spooky in the United States Air Force. So this is from a United States Special Operations plane, big plane that circles around like this, and has one huge cannon that comes out the side of the plane, and a smaller one as well that they can shoot things.
You do see the rectangular shaped building next to it, correct?
Yes, sir.
That's affirmative. This is a mosque. Do not engage the mosque.
The square building is the mosque or is the...
Rectangle. Rectangle.
Building is a mosque.
Right there.
Go. Roll it in.
Okay, and part of the mosque, there's 3 vehicles oriented east-west. Do you see those?
Yes.
I do.
Got a vehicle moving up.
Why are the vehicles moving right now?
You're clear to engage it.
Good.
Clear to engage.
Stand by. Do not engage. Do not just monitor.
Hey, channel 8 Spirit, you can pick it up channel 2.
Elevation.
Roger, you are now clear to engage the moving vehicle.
Be nominal, clear to
Any personnel around you see?
Stand by.
Yes, sir, personnel, clear to engage us also.
Roger.
Skill.
That first target confirmed.
Sensors. Disregard.
All right, that's where the video ends for today. In the course, we'll watch more of it. This is real, right? This is not a simulation. This is not a video game. This is real people's lives ending, and there are laws that govern real people's lives. Did you notice the very concerned question of which building was the mosque? Why? Why do you think that was a big deal? Why did they care? There's a legal reason, yes.
You're not allowed to shoot religious buildings?
That's exactly right. Religious buildings are not lawful targets in war unless they're being used for military purposes. So if there was an anti-aircraft battery sitting on top of a mosque, that makes it a legal target. But it's not a legal target when it's just a mosque sitting there, right? So very concerned that we don't shoot the right thing. Why? Because they become war criminals if they shoot the wrong thing, right? So we'll be talking about the law of war and getting an understanding of what limits our military service members and service members around the world in conflict. The assessment for that piece will involve some real-time watching of things like that, where I will be asking you, we'll pause, and I will ask you, lawful or not lawful to strike building X? Lawful or not lawful to shoot the person standing there? And you'll need to know that based on what we've studied in, of the Geneva Conventions and kind of what the law of war is about. Because those are the kinds of decisions that you may not have to make if you're not going to be a military service member, as I see most of us aren't, but that people really do make, and I think it personalizes what's really going on. I will also tell you that there are real lawyers who sit and listen and watch to those things as they are happening live, and give the thumbs up or thumbs down as to whether it's a lawful strike or not. Imagine practicing law where you have 3 seconds to make the right decision about whether somebody dies or somebody lives, or whether a lot of people die or a lot of people live. High stakes legal practice. Okay, so why take this course? I imagine many of you, if not all of you, say, I'm not planning to be in the military and I don't plan to practice in the military, so why should I take this course? I think there are a few good reasons to take it, whether or not you yourself are interested in military service. One is it's a really helpful comparison between the civilian justice system that we have and the military criminal justice system. So that both you can better appreciate what the civilian criminal justice system does, what it offers, and perhaps understand which is preferable in certain circumstances. I will tell you that the Uniform Code of Military Justice and the military justice system has been attacked as being unfair, interestingly, from both sides. It's been attacked as being unfair because it's too hard on the accused, and it's been attacked as being unfair because it's not hard enough on the accused, particularly more recently in the context of sexual assault, which we will be talking about. Sexual assault in the military, a hot topic in Congress, and something that we will talk about in terms of what the military has attempted to do to address that particular wrongdoing. I also think it's just helpful to appreciate military culture and service member sacrifices. I think it's meaningful to me anyway to know that the people who have raised their right hands and sworn to, under oath, to defend not the United States, they swear to defend, support and defend the Constitution of the United States. I think it's interesting that those very same people who say with their lives they will defend the Constitution of the United States don't get the same constitutional protections that everybody else gets. In other words, the defenders themselves don't enjoy the same constitutional protections as everyone else. I think, this is a typo here. Understand how law affects war is what I meant to say. How law works in war would be another way to say it. Understand that there are rules governing war. I think it's important to understand that, particularly in today's international climate where wars are ongoing in multiple places, so that you can have a good frame of reference as to what is lawful and what's not. There's been a lot of talk, for example, that the Assad regime in Syria is engaged in war crimes because it drops chemical weapons on civilians and other things that the Assad regime has done. This course will hopefully help you understand what is illegal about that and why perhaps we should follow the law of war, we being the United States in this instance, even if our adversaries don't. I can tell you when I taught something similar at the Air Force Academy, question number one on all the cadets' minds was, wait, how come if they don't follow the law of war, we have to? We'll explore that a little bit. I also think, I hope you can tell just from this presentation now, I think the military law and law of war is interesting. Whether you ever intend to practice it or not, it's just something interesting to be exposed to know what's going on in a kind of microcosm of our society. That's it from me. Any questions about this course? Yes?
Is it still true that the military code of justice is if you get a tattoo or branding, it is against the law because you're destroying government property?
No. And that's a common myth. Destruction of government property, thank you very much.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Cashman, appreciate it.
Sorry to run out.
No problem. Head on off to court. It's not. It's a common myth that that's kind of destruction of government property. It can be against the law, however, because one of the laws that we talk about is that you must obey all orders and regulations. Well, there are regulations about whether or not you're allowed to get tattooed and where you're allowed to get tattoos and so forth that are very interesting, and they're changing. The Army just relaxed their tattoo requirements in part because it's a recruiting problem. So the Army just said, well, we're going to allow tattoos in a few more places and a little bit larger than we had previously. But no, that's and we'll talk about some of those kind of things like destruction of government property. I think that's an interesting idea, and it's certainly one that the idea that your body is owned by the United States government when you're a service member is in large effect true, because your body can be ordered to go one place or another.
The reason I asked is because when I was in the service, my second week in my permanent place, the guy got branded. One of my fellow Army people got branded, and the smoke actually looked at him and said, "You do know we can charge you for destruction of government property."
Right. False. But a common myth.
But you can't get a Mike Tyson on your face.
You cannot. The Army has not relaxed it so much that you can get a face tattoo. But we'll talk about that, and I think it's fascinating when you think about the idea that the military can tell you to go take that hill, even though they know it's certain death to do so, right? That they own your body in a pretty profound way, with criminal sanction as the background. Any other questions I can address now? Yes.
When we talk about the process of becoming a lawyer for the Jazz Court,
We will talk about that, and I'll talk about that to the extent people want to. It's not a required element of the syllabus from my perspective, but I'd be happy to talk to people, and we'll talk about it in class. Like what are military lawyers? How do they get there? What do they do? Wide range of things, and yeah, that'll be definitely part of the course. We'll talk about that as well. That opportunity. Kate.
Are you going to be talking about the recent controversies that have happened in the past few years of POW versus deserter, a la the Bergdahl?
Absolutely. So, those of you who may be familiar, what's the name of the podcast?
Serial.
Thank you. There's a Serial podcast. The second season was about this case. Army Sergeant Bo Bergdahl was thought to be a prisoner of war in Afghanistan for 5 years. Facts have come to light that suggest he maybe actually left rather than was captured, and after he left was detained, captured for some period of time, left his post in Afghanistan. So yeah, we'll talk about that kind of hot topic case and other cases that come as well. So you may be familiar with the Chelsea Manning case. She was Bradley Manning at the time that she was on active duty, and as Bradley Manning released thousands and thousands of pages of classified documents to WikiLeaks, other kind of things. It's surprising how often military cases make the headlines of well-known websites and newspapers, and we'll be talking about them as they come up. But great question, thanks. Yes?
Are we going to be talking about the whole, like, don't ask, don't tell?
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in the terms of equal protection rights. Why is it that something that may not have been acceptable in the civilian society was considered acceptable? Also, earlier than Don't Ask, Don't Tell, the integration of the military, racial integration of the military that happened because it was forced upon the military, frankly, long ago. I also have some personal experience with Don't Ask, Don't Tell that I'll share in the class, both as a prosecutor, as a defense lawyer, and as somebody working at the Pentagon as Don't Ask, Don't Tell was being enforced, and then as Don't Ask, Don't Tell was being rolled back. Yeah, for sure, we're talking about that as well.
Okay.
Good hot topic question. Any other questions? Yes,
Do you know
Kristen.
what day your class is going to be? Or?
Yes, I do. I know for sure. It's going to be Tuesdays and Thursdays at noon.
Okay.
My favorite time to teach. Jessica.
Is it going to be set up like the Law and Society class, like you have 2 exams and a group presentation,
It'll
or
be-
is it going to be more assignment based?
It'll be more, I haven't finished for sure what the assessments are going to be, but it will likely be more assignment based and a different type of exam probably than in the Law and Society course if you've had me for that.
Okay.
It'll be different. There will not be group presentation, group papers or group presentations. I can tell you that. And there will be, there will very likely not be, unless one magically appears between now and then, an actual textbook to buy. It'll be a combination of online resources and stuff I just post for you and so forth. So kind of create my own combination of stuff for you. So at least it should save you $100. Any other questions about that course specifically? All right, well, I'm going to hang out for a couple minutes afterwards. If you haven't had the opportunity to sign in, please do so. It's important for us for accounting for the